Justice is one of the things that people talk about without being really specific. What does it really mean? Politicians talk about political justice. Lawyers, policemen talk about criminal justice. Economics talk about economic justice. What does it this really mean? Other people talk about justice as being as equality. Others talk just about justice as fairness. What does it really this mean? However, let's dive in this and see. The Greeks talk about justice as harmony, whereby somebody is supposed to behave in the way he or she is supposed to be in society. Somebody is supposed to be to behave justly in society. It means that if somebody goes away on the social order of the society, that is unjustly. Really? When you talk about the political libertarians, talk about justice as being letting people or the people of the country being free. But what does it really this mean? People talk about this without being specific. People talk about justice without bringing the clear context of justice. What does it really mean? What I have discovered, people talk about justice because it's a fundamental social, ethical ethical foundation of life. That's why people talk about all of this thing of justice. It's the more fundamental principle in life. However, what is your opinion if you talk about justice? My opinion is people talk about justice whereby they just rotate around the kind of stuff. Who has the kind of stuff? Who gets most? Who gets less? Who can access medical care, who can access this. But that's real justice. That's real we mean by what we call justice. Or justice is having access to a lawyer, having access to a doctor, having access to health services. Real, that is justice. Real. Let's talk about moral philosophy, whereby, for example, let's talk about distributive justice, whereby this when you talk about moral philosophy and talk about distributive justice, it have different schools of thoughts whereby different philosophers came up with different approaches to define what is real justice. For example, we have a moral philosophy that's called justice is equality, whereby individuals in the society they have to get the same kind of stuff in the society. Whereby if I hold a car, you have to be with a car. If I have a flat, you have to be with a flat. But that is real fair. I may need a different kind of stuff. You may need a different kind of stuff. Real, that is fair. Real, that is justice. This is criticized. People came up with different opinions criticizing about justice is required as a school of thought in moral philosophy. What is real we mean by justice? When you go ahead and talk about need-based justice school of thought, whereby in need-based school of thought, somebody is supposed to get only what he or she needs. There is not any kind of equality. When you talk about another school that is called merit-based justice, whereby this is an equality based on what some has actually. This is a kind of justice that's whereby somebody gets it on his or her merit. It means that some people will be owning more, others will be owning less. This will be contradicting with other school of thoughts. For example, justice as equality, whereby people talk about equality in justice. Really? What's your opinion about justice? What is your argument about justice? Because it has been having a lot of it has been having a lot of argument. When you talk about an American philosopher, John Locke, talk about justice as fairness. John Locke talk about justice as fairness, that as long as in the society you have fairness, or that's justice. Really? Other people talk about justice. Let's talk about an American philosopher called Robert Nozick. Robert Nozick talked about just criticize the American philosopher called John Locke, whereby Robert Nozick said that no, justice is not fairness, justice is not equality. By that time, he gave us an example of a popular basketball player, Wilt Chamberlain. By that time, he was there. He was popular by that time when Nozick bought this experiment. He bought us an example that Chamberlain, if Chamberlain was to play a football or a basketball whereby everybody who was supposed to entertain that ball was supposed to pay 25 cents in order to entertain that. It meant that Chamberlain will be getting a lot of money in basketball more than his friend. So according to Robert Nozick, believe that justice is not all about that, as you call it, justice, or justice is merit based. That's what Nozick. That's according to Nozick. However, we have human rights philosophers. They have also come up with talking about justice. That justice is just giving people right. For example, right to privacy, right to eat, right to access a lawyer, right to access a doctor. But that's really justice, really. Whereby in human rights philosophers, for them they differentiated the two rights. They talked about positive rights, they talked about even the negative rights. How? The positive rights they talked about that these rights are entitled to. We don't know what really means. Because the human rights philosophers, they talk about having access to aid, having access to right of privacy. They dive this in deep. How? They divided it into two, whereby they talked about positive rights and negative rights. Whereby they talked about that positive rights, these are rights that are not interfered with. It means that if you have the right, or if your right has not been interfered with, that's already access. That's already justice. They talked even about positive positive rights, whereby among positive rights somebody is entitled to help. But this is really justice. Why do you give me a burden of helping you? Why do you give me an obligation that I have to help you? What is justice according to your opinion? Really? What do we mean by justice? Go in the comment section and comment and bring your views and bring your opinion. What is justice? Because if you bring about the positive rights that I'm obligatory to help you, this is why Nozick, philosophers like Robert Nozick, an American philosopher of 20th century, criticize about this. Where is this right comes from? The right of making the richer to bring a lot of taxes to help the poor? Is this really justice? Whereby others are arguing about equality, whereby the wealthy they're paying a lot of taxes, the weak ones are the poor are paying they're paying less. This is real we mean by justice. Others talk about justice as a punishment. If somebody brought harm on you, it's the same punishment that you are supposed to suffer. What is really justice? Anyway, let's go out on the foundation, the biblical understanding of justice, whereby the biblical justice meant that if you did something, if you harmed your friend, if you murdered, you have to suffer the same punishment. But this is really justice also. No, I won't criticize the Bible. But if somebody brought harm on you, you need to suffer the same punishment. Today, when you talk about justice, justice has been modernized. It has the way to access justice has been modernized. In case, for example, if you are talking about punishment, justice has been modernized whereby finds somebody that has harmed you can pay fine, somebody that has breached you can pay fine, whereby they have even different ways. For example, under criminal law, how somebody can be punished. You have different ways. You have deterrent method whereby somebody is punished not again to repeat the same thing. But what does it really mean by justice? Because people have come up with different views about justice. What is your argument? What is your opinion about justice? Thank you for watching. Next video about discrimination.